There are two things we think of when we hear the word fair. Fair-skinned, a fair lady. Is it fair? It isn't fair. Right? So we look at fairness both as an expression of beauty and as an expression of equality in interaction. Right? If we have a balanced exchange, that's called a fair price. Right? So if the car costs $50,000 to produce and it sells for $60,000, and we understand that people need to make a profit, then we say that that's a fair price. Now, if the car costs $60,000 to produce, but it's sold for $1, we say that that's not fair. Now, on the one hand, you have to say that it's a balanced exchange, right? If someone puts a gun to your head and says, sell me this car for $1, you're getting your head and the dollar, and so you make the exchange. But people say that's not a fair price. That's an unfair advantage. So I think both of these meanings come together if we understand that beauty and symmetry have a lot to do with one another. When people pick attractive faces in tests, if someone does a split face, meaning if someone has a perfectly symmetrical face on both sides, statistically speaking, they are more attractive to the viewer because they're more symmetrical, right? There's more balance. And so beauty has something to do with balance. And the most beautiful shape, the most symmetrical shape known to humanity is the sphere, right? Because it's balanced no matter which way you slice it. If you cut a sphere in half, both sides are equal. And so the sphere is the most beautiful shape, the fairest shape. Now, if we look at kind of fairness in the same geometric terms, right? We look at the symmetry, the beauty, the symmetry. If we have a shape like this, right? An exchange of energy of equal size, it looks fair. It's similar if you have two eyes that are equal, right? If one eye is like that, it's not a fair face. It's not an equal face. So fair has a lot to do with equality. And unfairness, that's not fair. You're taking advantage. That's not right. That's not fair. You can see there's a connection between rightness and fairness, fairness and beauty, beauty and symmetry, rightness and symmetry. Well, you think of, a wheelwright. A wheelwright, right, is intending to design a symmetrical wheel. If it's not right, meaning if it's not true, so we now have truth. We have rightness, we have truth, we have fairness, we have symmetry. If it's not right, the wheel, it will be a bumpy ride. The wheel isn't right, means it's not true. If it's not true, it means it's out of balance. It means the hub is more to one side rather than truly in the middle. It means that the circle has not been carved correctly in the iron or in the wood. And so a wheelwright must right the wheel, must produce a circle that is true, right? That is fair, that is symmetrical, right? Now, when we look at an unfair fight, what are we talking about? We're talking about, right, the fight between a giant and an infant, right? When a giant beats an infant, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not beautiful, it's not true, it's not pleasing to the eye. We don't like the asymmetry of a bully picking on a victim. We don't like the asymmetry of the biggest, brawniest kid picking on the most scared, awkward kid that is an outsider, right? We don't like that asymmetry. It's not right. It's not fair. It's not beautiful. It's not true. It's not true to the shape. Now, we also don't like it, right? We don't like it when somebody takes an entire store's inventory, right? A gang comes in and clears out the inventory. And what they offer in exchange is nothing really, but we won't kill you, or we won't damage your shop. We're going to take all this stuff, and what you get out of it is nothing, but we won't punish you even more, right? So you have this huge asymmetry in value. It feels wrong, right? Because beauty and symmetry are so much together in our biology, in our mind, right? When a government attacks a sole individual and exploits the individual for governmental gain, it's not right. You have this large organization attacking this individual. It's not right. It's not fair, particularly when it's being funded by the taxes paid by individuals, right? And so if we look at unfairness, you need two qualities to create unfairness, to create an unfair exchange. The one is the size differential, right? So the law of mass dictates that when a pinball and a bowling ball collide, the pinball goes flying. The pinball is broken, but the bowling ball continues on its original trajectory, right? So this is the law of mass. When a large, dense object collides with a small object, the small object goes flying, the large object dominates. So the first thing you need for something to be unfair is you need there to be a size differential, right? So we look then to relationships between an individual and a company. You know, like if a company hires 12 attorneys and you don't have the money to even hire an attorney, the law of mass is working against you. If a company has $1 million to silence you, and you have $200 to protest, the scale, right, between $200 and $1 million, we're talking about thousands of you know, the scale is thousands of times bigger in the relationship. So anytime there is a relationship between two entities where one party is very large and the other is very small, a child and a parent, an individual and a large company, an individual and a gang, and a gang and a government. When there's a differential of size and power, that is the first prerequisite to an unfair, to an asymmetrical exchange of energy. And the second criteria is being sociopathic, right? So if your parent is 10, 20 times bigger than you as an infant, right? You weigh 4 pounds, your parent weighs 200 pounds, you have no language, your parent has language. When there's a big differential in scale, that's the first criteria for an unfair exchange. But the second is when you're sociopathic. If the large force protects the small force, if the large force protects the individual, the minority perspective, then you have a scale differential, but because you have an empathic protocol, the empathic protocol is who is in the most pain and how can we help. The sociopathic protocol is who is most vulnerable to being exploited so that we can make a killing, right? So who is in the most pain, how can we help? The empathic protocol. Who is most vulnerable, how can we exploit that to make a killing, is the sociopathic protocol, right? And capitalism is primarily sociopathic, right? If a competitor is on the edge of going bankrupt, right, the dominant player in that arena may cut prices knowing that they can sustain the loss and it'll wipe their competitor out in 2 months. And then they'll raise prices higher than the original prices because now they have no competitor, right? So they lower prices below cost, bankrupt their competitor, then they raise prices back to where they were before, and then they raise them again because the sociopathic protocol is to extract as much as possible. And if there's no competition, then the sociopathic business can charge the consumer twice what it did before because there's no other option, right? And that is the law of mass in the sense of you have a dependent relationship, right? And so you could call that another criteria, the law of mass, sociopathic. But it's kind of another expression of the law of mass. Because if you need food to eat, and I'm the only supplier of bread, money doesn't provide nourishment. It doesn't give you food, right? And so you've got money, I've got bread, I have life, right? And what do you have? You have paper, right? And so ultimately, when you're on an island or whatever, the survival resource is much more valuable than the paper. So these are some reflections on the word fair and fairness. And so the exchange is fair and balanced when you're dealing with an empath, regardless of the power differential or the scale differential. And you can have someone who's sociopathic who will become unfair as soon as they gain enough power to exercise their sociopathic protocol. If you are a pinball negotiating with a bowling ball, even if you are sociopathic, you can't dominate the bowling ball. So whether someone is empathic or sociopathic and where they are on that continuum is revealed when they gain the size and or power needed to dominate or serve, as is consistent with the sociopathic or empathic protocol.